to the tab in the description below, and I'll just run through a few tips that might be able to help you out learn it more accurately and more effectively. So there's 8 bars, and this is actually the intro to the song. There's 8 bars. It repeats quite a lot throughout the song, but it's just the same pattern repeated, more or less. So I'm going to look at, first of all, the first 7 bars, because they've got a lot of similarity in them, and then we'll treat bar 8 just slightly differently, because there's a couple of things that are different in that bar. So with that said, the first 7 bars, one thing that we need to bear in mind is we want all our notes to be ringing out cleanly. We don't want to be playing them just quickly, and they want to be ringing out. So that's consistent for all of the first 7 bars of the riff. Just bear that in mind, so you'll have the right technique for doing that. The second thing is, and this comes down to a little bit of reading and interpreting the tab. When I look at the tab, obviously I've got a little bit of experience. I can play the riff and I've experience at reading tab. I can spot patterns in the tab that hopefully makes it easier for me when I'm learning. I'll try and share the idea, the thing that I've spotted with you, so that when you're looking at either this tab or other tabs, you might spot little patterns that make it easier for you to learn it, and you'll be able to learn it faster and more accurately. So the pattern that I've spotted is, so I'm going to start with the first bar. So effectively what I'm starting with a B5 power chord, quite a common thing for Metallica songs, and the first 2 notes are just the notes of the B5 power chord. So I've got the 2nd fret on my A string and the 4th fret on my D string, and then the next 2 notes in bar 1, I'm playing my 2nd fret. Again, I'm lifting off my finger and playing my open D string. So I'm playing 2nd fret on my A, 4th fret on my D, 2nd fret on my A, and then open D. I don't have to do a lot of changing around and messing. All I'm doing there is lifting a finger off to complete the riff. Now, keep that in memory, what I've just done there. My first note stays the same, and then for the end of the riff I'm lifting my finger off. So let's have a look at bar 2. What am I playing? I'm playing 3rd fret on my E string, so that's a G, and again I'm playing my 4th fret on my D string. Back to my 3rd fret, my G, and then I'm lifting that note off again. So bar 1, I'm starting with a B, then lift the note off. Bar 2, I'm starting with a G, and lift that note off. You see where this is going? Now for the first 7 bars of this, we're using that same principle. Whichever note we start on, we swap between a B, a G, and there's an open A in there as we get a little bit further on. But the 2nd and 4th notes that we play are lifting that note off. So knowing that we've got that pattern, it should make it easier for us to be able to memorise and learn the first 7 bars of this piece. So the only thing that's actually changing is the starting note that we begin with. So in bar 1, we're starting with that B, so 2nd fret on your A string. Bar 2, we're starting with a G, 3rd fret on your E string. We're going back to for the 3rd bar, we're going back to the start, so it's the B, 2nd fret on your A string. And then for the 4th bar, we're going to repeat the G note, so 3rd fret on your E string. Just on that 4th bar, we've got an extra note added in, it's an open G string. So after we've played our, play an open G string. So the first 4 bars will be like this. in with that open G string. For this one, well, always make sure your guitar's in tune before you practice. But for this one, if you're not in tune, sometimes your G string goes out of tune. Make sure that's in tune because it'll catch you out with that note and it'll sound awful. So that'll let you know if you've tuned your guitar properly. Now, the second part of the riff, so bars 5, 6 and 7, it's more or less the same principle. We're going to start with the B, so the second fret on the A string 1. And then for bar 6, rather than, this is the new one, we're going to play the open A string as our starting note. And the other bit's the same. And bar 7, we're back to the G. And then we're on to bar 8, which is different. I'll cover that. So, hopefully I'll do it again. I'll play through bars 1 to 7, and I want you to notice that I'm not messing about with my hand all over the place like this. I'm trying to be efficient, I'm trying to leave my hand where it needs to be, and I'm just lifting off or putting on the fingers as necessary. So I'll play through bars 1 through to 7 so you can just have a look at how efficiently I'm trying to use my hand. I'm just lifting off one there. I've added that G note on there, I can leave that. I have to lift off 1 to get my A. 1 back onto my G. And then we're up to bar 8. So, to me, that's the most efficient way and simplest way to play it. Hopefully you'll find the same as well. Now when we get to bar 8, I did say for the first 7 bars we want the notes to be ringing out cleanly and you know, and not stopping, so we don't want the ringing out. If you look at bar 8 on the tab, you'll see, well, there's 2 things. 1, that it's a different notes, a different pattern, and 2, that you've got a couple of rests in there. So the rests mean that there's a period in the bar where we don't want to be hearing any sound, we don't want to be hearing any notes. So at that point, that's where we want it to change slightly, because we don't want the notes to be ringing out. So bar 8, we start off with open E string, and then second fret on the A string. That's what it would be like if I was ringing it out, but it's not ringing out. The second note, the second fret note, I'm going to stop that by muting it. I can use palm mute, I can use finger muting on this hand, whichever you're more comfortable with, doesn't really matter. And the same again for the last 2 notes of the piece. We've got a second fret on the E string and a second fret on the A string. So each time we play the note 2, the second note's going to be muted, and then 2 2, they're muted out. So together, rather than, make sure we get those mutes in for those rests so that we kill those notes dead. Without it, it just doesn't sound the same. The final thing on this piece is because we've got, if you listen to when we play it, we've got the first 4 notes, then we've got a little period of nothing there before we play the next ones. A little period of nothing. So the final thing that I just want to share with you is the timing. This is something that catches out so many of my students because they tend to rush, and I understand why, because they don't want to get behind and sound like they're not up to speed, but it's also important to make sure you leave breathing room in the song to be able to A, keep in time if you're playing along with the record or with others, and B, for it to sound right. So that's an important skill that a lot of students that I know do have a little bit of difficulty with and need to work on. So rather than trying to rush it through and just play all the notes as soon as you see them, exaggerated of course, make sure that we leave those spaces in. Easy way to practice that is use your friend Mr. Metronome and play along, and make sure that you've got the notes where they should be, because it's easy when you can hear the clicks. You're not trying to think, oh, how much space do I leave there? We can use a metronome to help us with that. So once more, just play it through the metronome so that you can hear that I'm leaving the correct spaces between the notes so it sounds correct. So you can see how the tempo is helping to keep you in time, so that the notes that are played together are nicely in time with the subdivisions, and where you leave the gaps are nicely in time too. If you listen on the metronome that I'm using, probably always the same if you use an app, the first note on the 4 count has a slightly different tone to it to let you know that's the first note of the bar, so you know when to play the first note of each bar. So it makes it nice and easy. If that's at 99, which is the tempo it's giving me off the tab, that's what I was playing to then. As ever, slow it down to whatever tempo you need to whilst you're learning it. Don't worry about rushing it, get it nice and clean, and then work the speed up later rather than trying to play it fast and fluffing the notes. Enjoy.